The lights of Charlotte glittered against the December sky as I pulled into the long, circular drive of Clara's home. The house looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Every window lit with a warm golden glow, wreaths perfectly balanced on each pane, candles flickering in the entryway. I smoothed the skirt of my dress, simple but carefully chosen, and tried to steady the nerves rising in my chest. It wasn't the first time Clara had invited me to one of her dinners, but it always felt like a test, a chance to prove I could blend into her world of polished glass and sharp suits. Inside, the hum of conversation drifted out with the cold air as the door opened. I caught a glimpse of the room beyond, crystal glasses raised. Men in tailored jackets. Women in jewel-toned silk. My daughter's world. Then Clara appeared, flawless in navy velvet, her smile tight when she saw me. "Mom, can we talk for a moment?" she said, guiding me into the foyer before I could step inside. Her voice lowered, crisp as if she were addressing a junior associate at her law firm. "You're not ready to sit with the family tonight." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. The sounds of laughter and clinking glass carried through the walls, so at odds with the ice in her tone. "I don't want you to misunderstand," she continued quickly. "It's just we have important people here. Senators, investors. I can't risk simple talk derailing things." "Simple talk," I repeated, my voice catching before I could stop it. She gave me that professional smile she'd perfected over years in the courtroom. "I'll explain it to Dad's family. They'll understand." I stood frozen, coat still buttoned, the bag of homemade cookies I'd brought slipping against my palm. My daughter, the child I'd raised through lean years and long nights, was telling me I wasn't fit to share her table. I nodded once, stiffly, and turned. The night air stung as I walked back to my car. The drive from Charlotte to Asheville blurred, headlights streaking against the dark, her words looping through my head until silence pressed heavier than the road. By the time I reached home, the house felt colder than it had in years, and I knew the memory of that rejection would not fade easily as the night stretched ahead. I had been 28 when the world shifted under my feet. One icy February morning, a state trooper knocked on my door with the news that my husband's car had skidded off a mountain road. In an instant, I was a widow with a 3-year-old daughter, and bills stacked higher than the kitchen counter. I took whatever work I could find teaching night classes at the community college, cleaning cabins on weekends, and consulting on small renovation projects when anyone would hire me. During the day, Clara sat in a plastic chair beside me as I drafted notes or flipped through manuals on sustainable design. When she fell asleep, I studied by the glow of a desk lamp, determined to earn the certifications that would one day open doors in housing development. There were years when Christmas gifts came from thrift stores and dinners were beans stretched 3 ways. But Clara never went without books or shoes. I wanted her to see that survival wasn't just scraping by, it was pushing forward. And she did push. She was sharp, disciplined, and ambitious. By high school, she was captain of the debate team, already talking about law school. I remember sitting in the bleachers during her first competition, pride swelling in my chest. But as Clara climbed, something between us shifted. My work became a source of embarrassment. She corrected me when I spoke about projects, brushing them off as little cabins or mom's hobby. Harriet noticed it before I could name it, over coffee at her kitchen table. She put her hand over mine. "She's chasing their approval. Marjorie, not yours. Don't lose yourself trying to keep up with her pace." I smiled, but her words stayed with me, heavy as stone. By the time Clara earned her law degree, the distance was measured not just in miles, but in tone, in glances that dismissed everything I had built. And still, I kept building, the night after her rejection in Charlotte. Those years came flooding back, each sacrifice weighing heavier than the last as I sat surrounded by the quiet of my Asheville home. The holidays had long ago stopped feeling like gatherings and turned into examinations. At Clara's table, surrounded by her husband's family and colleagues, my work was always a punchline waiting to happen. I remember one Christmas when I tried to share that a small nonprofit had funded a set of cabins I'd designed for veterans struggling with housing. Clara tilted her head, her wine glass catching the light, and said with a smile that cut sharper than any knife, "Mom builds these little eco-cabins, cute projects, but they don't exactly pay the bills." Laughter rippled around the table, and I sat with my hands folded, heat creeping up my neck. Her in-laws were worse. Not cruel in intention, but dismissive in habit. At Thanksgiving one year, her father-in-law, a retired banker, leaned back in his chair and asked, "So you're in construction?" He said it like he was guessing the weather. Clara didn't correct him. She laughed softly, as if the question were accurate enough. I swallowed my pride and let it pass, though every part of me wanted to explain. My work wasn't hammer and nails, it was design rooted in efficiency and dignity. Systems that could keep families warm without crushing them under utility bills. But words seemed wasted when their eyes had already glazed over. What none of them knew was that behind those little cabins lay years of vision slowly coming into focus. Outside Asheville, on a plot of land I had scraped together savings to buy, the Green Haven project was taking shape, a cluster of affordable solar-powered homes designed for working families who had been priced out of the city. The plans were finished, permits filed, partnerships signed. I carried the blueprints in my briefcase even to Clara's dinners, though I never pulled them out. While they toasted mergers and courtroom victories, I held on to the quiet certainty that my work mattered, even if it wasn't their kind of success. And as I sat alone after that last rejection, I thought of Green Haven and the months of work ahead, wondering if this project might finally speak louder than their silence. The drive back from Charlotte left me hollow. By the time I reached Asheville, the house was silent. Only the faint hum of the heater breaking the stillness. I slipped off my coat, set down the untouched cookies, and walked straight to my desk. The folders were already open, spreadsheets littered with numbers I'd been massaging for months, and blueprints for Green Haven spread across the surface like a map of my stubborn hope. I adjusted the lamp and forced myself into the familiar rhythm of work. Square footage, projected costs, solar yield ratios, numbers that steadied me when emotions threatened to break loose. Outside, the city glowed with holiday lights. But here, the only sparkle came from lines of calculations. At some point, I reached for the remote, needing background noise. The television flickered to life on the local news. I nearly missed it at first, my eyes still on the blueprints. But then I heard the anchor's voice sharpen with excitement. "Breaking news tonight. A landmark agreement has been finalized for affordable renewable housing in Western North Carolina. The Green Haven project, led by consultant Marjorie Ellison in partnership with the Mountain Housing Alliance, has secured a $120 million HUD-backed contract. This initiative is expected to be one of the largest of its kind in the Southeast." I froze, pen slipping from my fingers. On the screen, my name scrolled across the ticker, followed by images of the site just outside Asheville. Reporters spoke of innovation, sustainability, and community impact. Words I had carried in silence now broadcast into living rooms across the region. For a long moment, I just sat there, the glow of the screen reflecting off the papers spread before me, as if the world had chosen that exact night to remind me I was never unworthy. The news cycle moved quickly, but that night It felt as though every station in North Carolina had paused to speak my name. Anchors repeated the figure $120 million, like it was almost too large to believe. They called it a groundbreaking public-private partnership, the largest renewable housing contract in the Southeast. Images of the land outside Asheville filled the screen, computer renderings of the homes rising in neat rows, each roof fitted with solar panels angled to catch the sun. I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling, watching strangers describe the vision I had carried for years. They called me a pioneer in sustainable housing, a phrase that felt both foreign and impossibly validating. Reporters spoke of community transformation, of an affordable model that could ripple across the region, words I had whispered to grant committees and scribbled in margins of notebooks now echoed with authority. The phone rang. Startling me, Harriet's voice came through thick with tears. "Everyone's talking about you, Marjorie. They finally see what I've always known. You did it." I tried to answer, but my throat tightened. All I could manage was a shaky laugh. Harriet filled the silence, describing neighbors who had already texted her, colleagues who wanted to know how long I'd been working on this project. For the first time in years, the question wasn't whether I belonged in the conversation, but how far this work could go. When the call ended, the house was quiet again. I sat in the glow of the television. Pages of spreadsheets and sketches still spread before me, but the numbers no longer looked like endless hurdles. They looked like proof. I thought of Clara's words at the door in Charlotte, of her careful smile as she shut me out, and for the briefest moment I imagined her face if she were watching the news tonight. But the thought faded, replaced by a heavier truth recognition from the world could not erase the ache of silence from family. The night stretched on, and with it came a dawning realization that victory, no matter how large, would always carry the weight of what had been lost. Sleep never came. I left the television on mute, the images of my name scrolling past like a dream I wasn't ready to touch. Instead, I sat in the quiet, the contract papers stacked neatly on the desk, the house holding its breath around me. Clara's words returned in fragments, sharp as broken glass. Not ready. Simple talk. Not worthy. I pressed my palms against my temples, but the echoes only grew louder. Somewhere beneath them, another memory stirred. Clara at 16, standing in the kitchen with her debate trophy clutched tight, telling her friends, "My mom works harder than anyone I know. She never gives up." Her eyes had shone with pride then, and I had believed her. When had pride turned into shame? When had the child who once saw strength in my persistence begun to see only smallness in my choices? The hours stretched, and I let the questions burn through me. For too long, I had measured my worth against Clara's approval, as though her acceptance were the final proof that I had done enough. I realize now how much of my silence at those holiday tables, how many swallowed words, had been a desperate attempt to keep her love intact. But the world had shifted tonight, and not because of her. The deal was real. The project was real. My work stood tall without her blessing by dawn. As the first streaks of light touched the mountains outside, I whispered aloud, steady and sure, "I don't need her seat at the table. I've built my own." And as the sun rose, the phone began to buzz with calls that would carry me into the morning after. By the time the sun rose, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. Reporters left messages asking for interviews. Government officials requested meetings, and nonprofits wanted to discuss partnerships. My email filled faster than I could open it. Subject lines bold with words like historic, record-breaking, transformational. The quiet of my house had turned into a storm of attention. I drove to my Asheville office mid-morning, the old brick building suddenly feeling too small for what had just landed in my lap. Staff from the nonprofit partner were already inside, fielding calls, their faces lit with excitement. I set my bag down, trying to anchor myself in the chaos. When the receptionist's voice came through the intercom, "Marjorie, there's someone here to see you. Says she doesn't need an appointment." I walked to the lobby, and there was Clara, polished, composed, her navy blazer sharp enough to cut glass. She smiled as though the night before had never happened. "Mom," she said warmly, leaning in as if to embrace me. "This is huge. Everyone's talking about you. I came because we need to strategize, figure out how we can leverage this for the family. Investors, donors, connections. It's all right here." Her words flowed like a pitch, not a daughter's greeting. She spoke of introductions she could arrange, names I should know, rooms I might now be invited into. I listened, but the knot in my chest tightened with each sentence. Clara wasn't here out of love, nor apology. She was here because success had shifted the balance, and she wanted her share of the light. I stood still, the noise of her ambition pressing close, already knowing this conversation would not end the way she expected. I led Clara back into my office, closing the door behind us. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of words waiting to be said. She perched gracefully on the edge of the chair opposite my desk, her phone in hand like a prop, as if she were preparing for a negotiation. "Mom," she began, all polished enthusiasm, "you're finally in the spotlight. This is the moment to move strategically. I can connect you with investors, bring you into the right circles. We could turn this into something even bigger, national. Maybe international." I studied her carefully, her tone so smooth, her eyes sharp and calculating. There was no trace of the daughter who once ran barefoot through our yard, waving her debate trophies in triumph. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. "When I worked nights just to keep food on the table, when I left you with neighbors so I could study, so I could earn credentials nobody believed I needed. Where were you when I built this project with no help, no safety net?" She shifted, but her smile didn't falter. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I only wanted to protect you from embarrassment. Image matters in my world. Mom, I didn't want you to be judged. Protect me." My voice rose. Years of silence breaking at once. "You stood in front of me and said I wasn't worthy to sit at your table. That wasn't protection. That was dismissal. That was shame." Her smile slipped, replaced with irritation. "I didn't mean it like that. But you know appearances are important. People notice everything." I leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "Family doesn't measure worth in appearances. Family shows up when the bills are overdue, when the work is hard, when nobody else cares. You told me I wasn't worthy. Now I tell you, I don't need your validation." Clara's face tightened. For once, she had no rehearsed response. She glanced toward the door, then back at me, searching for some softness, some opening that wasn't there anymore. "I was trying to help," she murmured, her voice thinner now. "You were trying to control." I replied evenly, "But that time is over. I built this without your approval, and I'll keep building without it." The silence stretched. Finally, she stood, slipping her phone into her bag with hands that trembled ever so slightly. Her composure was cracking, though she fought to hold it together. "I'll be in touch," she said, her voice brittle. I didn't answer. I watched her leave, her heels clicking down the hallway until the sound faded, leaving only the hum of the office around me. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, as if a weight I had carried in silence had finally been set down. And when Harriet walked in later that afternoon, holding 2 coffees, I knew I was ready to choose a different kind of family. Harriet arrived that afternoon with 2 steaming cups of coffee, her eyes already scanning my face. She didn't ask what had happened. She knew me well enough to read the shift in my shoulders, the loosened weight. She handed me a cup and sat down across from me. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "Blood doesn't define family. Loyalty does, and you've got plenty of that, even if it doesn't come from the people you expected." Her words settled into me like a balm. For so long I had clung to the hope that Clara would one day see me, that recognition from her would make all the struggle worthwhile. But here, in Harriet's steady presence, I realized family could be chosen the ones who stayed, who believed without conditions. Later that week, I met with a group of young engineers at the Asheville office. They were fresh out of school, full of nervous energy, their notebooks brimming with ideas. One of them, a quiet young woman named Lila, shook my hand with both of hers. "Thank you for opening this door," she said. "I didn't think someone like me could have a place in this field." The gratitude in her eyes pierced deeper than any award or headline. Around the table, others echoed her words, their respect unforced, their excitement genuine. Standing among them, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had silenced Clara's judgment, but because I had finally stepped free of its shadow. And as I looked at the faces of those who had chosen to stand with me, I knew exactly where I belonged when the ribbon was cut on Green Haven. Months later, the chill of spring still lingered in the mountains as I stood before a row of finished homes in the Green Haven community. Ribbons of bright fabric fluttered in the wind, cameras flashed, and families waited with keys in hand, ready to step into houses built to last. At the center of it all stood the sign, the Ellison Housing Fund. I took the shovel from a volunteer and planted a young oak near the entrance, its roots breaking into the earth as a symbol of everything we had worked toward. Applause rose around me, but my gaze stayed on the tree. It would grow long after I was gone, sheltering those who came next. Clara wasn't there. I had half expected her to appear, dressed for the occasion, ready to claim her place in the spotlight. But the space she left empty no longer ached. The absence was quiet, almost peaceful, like a door I had finally closed. As the ceremony wound down, I stood taller, the mountain air filling my lungs. Worth, I realized, isn't granted by those who dismiss you. It's lived, one choice at a time. And this was mine.